So complete speculation, just guesswork on my part. I don't think that that's true. So the question reads, does PulseX address being the largest holder of DAI indicate a potential attempt to create parity between eDAI and pDAI, which would be Ethereum DAI and PulseChain DAI, I'm assuming, through cross-chain liquidity providing sense once PulseChain is live? In my opinion, no, nothing to do with creating a parity narrative. If there was any use case, like I said earlier in the thing, I think it's marketing. It's hard to ignore the elephant in the room about the largest wallet holds DAI, about how it held its stability relative to USDC as a stable coin. To me, it's advertising. And then when the repeg happened, it was profit as far as even a narrative of marketing of 7 million in profit. I think that was pretty cool. Now, the OA or SAC address can do absolutely anything it chooses to do with that. Maybe it wants to buy an island from Richard Branson or something. Who knows? It may have no service whatsoever, no benefit to any sacrifice or anything to do with PulseChain whatsoever. I would say that if someone else was playing the game and they were saying a different kind of promise, they might have use for the capital. And the capital in a different scenario altogether could be something along the lines of, now that there is a launch of their blockchain, there could be a pool potentially to reinforce something like the fork that Walrus does, or the fork of things that they care about. If the underlying asset is PulseChain in that scenario, or the underlying asset is a different L1 in the hypothetical I'm talking about, there could be a reason to have a parity and have a reference, whether it's in DAI or just a transition of economic energy to be part of the marketing launch of a stable coin. I like a lot about the protocols since I've learned more about them of liquidity forks. I think that they're really pretty cool. Because it supports the narrative of decentralization, supports the narrative of validator, supports the narrative of equal play for equal participation. It supports the narrative of a dollar reference. My only challenge is when it comes to oracles. And I think Walrus can highlight, what percentage of risk Oracle may offer in these different narratives of stablecoin. Because right now, the oracle for USDC was, what does Coinbase say and what does Joe Biden say? That was the oracle. And in code and protocol, where the rule sets of the game, the people that set the redemption are the people that decide to hit the button to redeem in these liquidity protocol forks. So can you comment a little bit about Oracle, and is that a real risk vector, or is it a small percentage of the consideration for this as a stablecoin?
Yeah, absolutely. So first on the question, I don't think so as well, and I'm disagreeing with RH here. So make sure that you value that on how you take the advice here, because betting against RH is statistically not worked out very well for many people. But I'm big on being intellectually honest, so I'm still going to put my opinion forth on this. That pairing and the idea of parity between these assets on the two chains has never made much sense to me. I don't know why any of these things would be priced the same. They're different things. Like, just because the coding is the same, like, is Hex on ETH the same as Hex on Ethereum? No, for a variety of reasons. And to me, the same answer is true on PulseChain. So Hex is one that, particularly because there's such a sharing of values and the idea of PulseChain, where all that comes from, it makes more sense with that particular asset. But why would I even want them to be priced the same? Like, one of these things is 3 years in market. One of these doesn't. One of these is on a chain with hundreds of millions of users. One of these is a new network. Like, we can say, like, if they do come out to be priced the same, it could just be essentially like a valuation to me where they landed the same, but that the math is different to them. So the idea of that we're going to pair these things together, that was never something that I thought really held much water in the way that I would want to do things. And I would caution people from trying to just pair these liquidities of these different assets together, especially for something like DAI. But again, just for context, like, that's something that I'm very contrarian on. So again, I'm going to voice my opinion, but I would default to the big brains and RH and those guys.
Well, comment about Oracle about,
yeah, absolutely. So So with Liquidity actually uses Chainlink and then has Teller as a fallback. And so there's a variety of ways you can implement oracles correctly. So Chainlink is more centralized than I would like, but it has held up very well. But similar to USDC, we kind of see the failures that can happen. So USDC uses, Chainlink uses a multi-sig that is roughly 4 of 9. The problem with that is if you can't even say that it takes 4 because you don't know that one person doesn't have all 4 keys. So it's a multi-sig, but it could still just be one person. So the idea there is that oracle is still a risk. Now, Chainlink also backs up Aave and a dozen other of the biggest DeFi protocols. So it's ran very well. It's very battle tested at this point, but it is centralized and it does have a central point of failure. So it's not what we leaned on. We decided to go with Teller's infrastructure. With Teller, there's a few different things that make it very clean. One is anyone can be a reporter and anyone can input prices. That's the first part. So when you look at the reporter network from the Oracle, there's not a Oracle, there's an Oracle network. And Teller's Oracle network functions relatively similar to proof of stake, where everyone's a reporter, they can put out prices and you can call out another reporter for a bad price. And there's a process that you go through where token holders and other reporters can dispute pricing and go through these things. There's a delay on pricing that you can change per protocol. So you can adjust, even saying we use an oracle, that can be different for protocols. So a recent one that was a very bad implementation of one was it's Bonk BNQ. I have no idea what their stuff was, but they had an oracle failure, but it wasn't a failure of the oracle. It was an absolute terrible job coding where there was no lead. So if you have no delay and there's a wrong price, there's no dispute period. So it ended up just being an oracle that was essentially an admin key. As soon as someone reported a bad price, this thing broke. And that's not the way it'll be implemented on liquid loans. And it's not the way it'll be implemented by anybody programming something properly. And so with something like LL, this isn't something that needs lightning fast price upgrades, like say the New York Stock Exchange, where you're talking about Ethernet cable algorithm battles, right? That's something where that bandwidth and that pricing update needs to be hyper fast. For us, we're basically making sure that 10% from 110%, that 10% buffer and collateral is never exposed, and so that you have proper liquidations. So you want that to be fast, but it doesn't have to be 1 second, 1 second, 1 second price update. So we can have a larger delay there to make sure that pricing is smoothed out, because this isn't about sniping liquidations. You would rather have a more resilient price structure that miss a liquidation or two than have failures that can cause cascades and big issues. So it comes from using proper oracles and then proper structure on coding to make sure that those things actually are resilient along the way. So both of those make a big difference on making sure that those things are overall resilient. But for all the lip service, oracles can fail. That is an attack vector. People do need to understand what that is. And you can just disagree with me, right? Like I've got a well thought out opinion. I can explain these things. We can look through, but it's fine to say, hey, that's just not something I want to do. I want to participate with another thing. But again, I think that when applied correctly, that's very, very small attack surface compared to most of the things and many of the things that we already engage with. So I think it's a great way of doing things. But again, understand, look through this, know that there is attack surface there, and then we can all make our own judgments.
A couple points on this too before we go to USD. So speaking of the stablecoins on PulseChain, so 0xCoast, CST stablecoin, fiat on-ramps, that's an area as well. And then RH, if RH were to make a stablecoin, what would that look like? Would it be backed Hex? We saw the tweet earlier, DAI backed by Hex. Is that even an interesting idea based on this stuff? Like, what do you all think about those two things?
No,
Hex is a bad collateral for all the reasons we like it now. Low
right.
liquidity, it's volatile, it goes up a bunch, it goes down a bunch. And even the price structure on it is the fact that Hex went down the percentage it did isn't because Hex is bad. It's actually because Hex is good, because the people who sold the bottom and actually pushed that bottom down were long-term stakers who were up a ton of money. So if you look at that price, Hex went down 90% if you just measured top down. But if you look at what actually happened was, what that chart is telling you, the story it's telling you, is that that thing went up an insane amount. And because people were staking, everybody who got to sell 30 plus cents got to sell at unreasonable high gains. And then what it's telling you when it gets to the bottom is that Hex is so good that if you do the things that it is prescribed in the ecosystem and staking, that you can do everything wrong, have poor order execution, sell the bottom, and you can still be up hundreds of X. And then that action gave everyone else the best entry that was possible, where because a handful, really two, because two whales took a huge amount of profit and are now wealthier than when they started, you got to come buy it under 2 cents. And like, that's how that thing works. So all of those beautiful things about Hex's price action that we love are why it's terrible collateral.
So what would be, if RH were to do a stable coin, would it be backed by DAI, ETH? I mean, I guess what are the options?
My opinion is and again, I've not sacrificed for anything other than PulseChain, PulseX. I'm not a participant when it comes to liquid loans or Power Cities liquidity forks that they've developed. I can imagine that after there's battle test of significant economic energy through those, and code has been reviewed, and there's the comfort that the underlying asset of the L1 token itself is what's being redeemed and hoarded. It seems like that would be something that RH would probably support. I don't know that he would launch his own or anything that as far as his own glory, but he has in the past said that if other people build things that are built well and serve the public good, then he's not just looking to compete just for his own brand stamp. He has said things along those lines in the past, that when he gets to something, he will get to something, but hopefully someone will build a platform, for this, that, or the other. And it seems like, and again, just outside of the LL liquid loans narrative, I've been more harsh than any. And I think also Walrus gives great caution about loan leverage, risk, all these other kinds of things, because liquidation events are part of the protocol model. Like, that is part of how it supports stability for a stable coin narrative and how it awards liquidity providers for the protocol itself. So like, there's a lot of caution I have about its use case by people that use the protocol to extract value. That's just my own, avoidance of leverage. But in general, I can see a reasoned why a liquidity fork that uses the L1 token would be supported by RH or OA. Just leave it at that.
And where does CST, what coast? Very ambitious project. The fiat on ramps, they seem to be very serious about it, though. What do you think about that? Game changer? Wait and see. Opinions on Coast's project?
I've asked in the past what limits, and it may be country by country as far as onboard, offboard limits, conversion into using it basically as a fiat bridge. So if you're coming from one nation currency into the ecosystem of cryptocurrency and then you're exiting back out, it depends on their banking relationships as far as I understand. And I don't know that they're doing the same as TUSD in an escrow kind of company versus some other kind of money transmitter licensure and things like that. They seem to have gotten permissions from quite a few countries, at least what 0xCoast has published, and said, hey, this country and this country has been added to the roster. But I honestly don't know enough about the function of or the limits both on or off as far as fiat to crypto conversion.
So I don't want to sound like I have a ton of inside baseball, but I've had a few private discussions with them on some of the mechanics, and I'm just not sure what all they put out just yet. So I don't want to overstep and overshare. And Christian always says, talk out of school. So I won't talk out of school. But I do like what they're doing. I think the model is very, very positive. Something that he did said that really stuck out to me, and I think is very on brand. He he basically said, I don't really care if Coast is successful as long as someone's successful in doing what he wants to do. So he basically put it out that, hey, if someone launched a Coast light product and there was a fiat on ramp and everything was good, he was fine. He could care. Like, he is building something to add functionality and infrastructure. And that says a lot about him and his character to me. So I have a lot of faith in the limited time that I've spent with their team. I think they're good guys. I think they're going about things the proper way. And having that fiat on ramp is important. Having multiple stable coins is very healthy for an ecosystem. So I've seen limited where people brought up that, like, oh, is our stable coins competitive? No, not at all. I'm glad they're coming. I hope they keep building cool stuff. And regardless of when anyone ever competes with my stuff or anyone else's narrative, there are not enough smart people in the world doing cool stuff. I'll take each and every one of them I can get on the chain. I don't care if they disagree.
Well, yeah, shout out to Stoic. What, Rhino? I think that was Rhino from the Coast team. Again, very serious.
Resolute, couple of good guys.
Yeah. We hope they're successful. I think, again, ambitious project. From what I've seen with them the last year or so, they seem to be putting a lot of pieces together. Weight is another token they have. We'll see how that plays into things. So it's, very, very interesting guys and dev teams. And hey, people are building some amazing stuff with this ecosystem. So we like that. We hope people are successful.